For those of you who have been following me over the years, you probably know that fall is my favorite time of year. I absolutely love the colors, I love the holidays, I love the crisp, cool air after the South's muggy, horrible hot heat. And I really like decorating for Halloween. I love the pumpkins. I love anything that's kind of this cutesy, spooky feel. And that is why I am super excited to be creating this art gallery with all these different animals that eventually will just have little hints and nods to the Halloween season. So let's go ahead and get started with this and make a little witch's hat for our fox. For this project, I will be using black cardstock paper to make the base of our witch's hat. These die cuts will be stacked on top of one another to create a 3D shape, which will act as a way to attach cobwebs as well as gems to our witch's hat. There are two ways that you can create these die cuts. The first is by printing out the shape that I've provided for you as a 2.5 inch wide by 2 inches tall hat. For method number 1, you will print the shape out and then trace the shape onto black cardstock paper. Once you have finished your trace, go ahead and take an X-Acto knife and cut the shape out. You're going to need at least 5 of these shapes for the base of your hat. The second method is the easiest of the two. However, I know not everyone owns a Cricut, so use the previous option if need be. Using your Cricut design space, create a new project. Then upload the witch's hat file as I provided and add it to Canvas. Once your canvas opens, resize the hat to a 2.5 inch wide by 2 inches tall shape. This shape will work best for the fox drawing template that is an 8.5 by 11 inches. However, once again, if you prefer to make your fox drawing larger or smaller in size, test out the witch hat size in several different sizes before committing to one particular size. Then copy and paste the hat 12 times until you fill up that 12 by 12 inch sheet. As I said earlier, you will need at least 5 of these shapes for our hat base. But since we are using the Cricut machine and it's always really nice to have extra pieces, go ahead and make 12 of these. Once you're happy with the placement of your shapes, go ahead and click Make It. You will then be prompted to select how you will load the material and the size of the material you wish to use. I will be cutting on a standard grip Cricut mat with 12 by 12 inch black cardstock paper. Once you have selected these options, you will then be prompted to add the material type. Then load the material and your mat into the machine and click the Load Unload button as prompted. Next, press Go once the machine's button is flashing. Allow the Cricut to cut all the materials before moving on to the next step. Once you have your die cuts, I recommend placing them in a pile in front of you for easy access while working. If you have problems removing your die cut from the mat, I recommend slightly curling the mat and encouraging the materials to kind of pop off on their own. Since we will be working with glue, I recommend cutting open a Ziploc bag and laying it out on your table. This will prevent the glue from sticking to your table as well as the die cut from sticking to the table from the glue. Next, make sure to cut a 12-inch to about 14-inch length string from your spool. This measurement doesn't have to be exact. Just a decent length because we will be using scraps of this thread over and over again for our cobwebs. Once you have your thread cut, begin to unwind the thread until you are left with small strings. These strings will make up the cobwebs of our hat. I was able to get 6 tiny strings from my thread, as you can see here. Set these aside for later use. To make things a bit easier for me, I'll be using a guide under my plastic mat. This guide has a simple cobweb design attached to the hat. I will be using the lines of this cobweb to guide where I will be gluing my threads on my hat. Using your Tombow glue tape runner, add glue to the entire back side of the hat where our threads will be attached. With the string we prepped earlier, lay down 5 strings going from the tip of the hat to the bottom in rays as seen in the guide. This will act as the first layer of web on our hat. To help secure the threads, you can use your Cricut Weeder tool to press the thread securely into the glue, just like you see me doing here. Once your strings are laid out where you desire with your tacky glue, add another hat directly on top of the previous one. This will sandwich the threads between them and securely stretch the threads taut. With a palette knife or a Cricut spatula, press the 2 hats together until they are flat, basically trying to remove any bubbles or bumps from between those layers. Also try to use as little glue as possible so that we don't have any excess glue spilling over the edges. Allow to dry before moving on to the next step. Once again, using your Tombow glue tape runner, add glue to the entire back side of the hat. This time we will be using a needle to thread our string and basically weave it through our previous string layers. I recommend weaving the thread over the first string and then under and then over and then finally under again, that last string, basically to create a simple weave. Attach the base of the thread to the hat and then thread the string back through, weaving under this time and then over and then under and finally over until you can attach the thread back to the hat. Cut off any excess thread and repeat this process 2 more times, slowly ascending up the threads. This is going to be the completion of our second layer of cobwebs. Once your strings are laid out where you desire, with your tacky glue once again, add another hat directly on top of the previous one and then allow it to dry before moving on to the next step. And now you probably know the drill, to be perfectly honest. We're going to take our Tombow glue tape runner, add glue to the entire back of our hat, But this time we're going to basically take our thread and needle and create small little knots in our strings. So I recommend kind of weaving your needle and string through those previously looped threads. And then looping it around several times on the last string. Basically, you're trying to create a little knot and tighten up those threads into basically a little rat's nest. I don't want these cobwebs to look super refined or cute, basically. I want them to look like they're just kind of there and they've been there for a while. Once you've created that small little knot, go ahead and take that thread and bring it back to the hat to attach it to the glue. Repeat this process again 2 more times, closer to the center and then the back top side of the hat. Once your strings are laid out where you desire, with your tacky glue once again, add another hat directly on top of the previous one, and then allow it to dry before moving on to the next step. Now for this step, I recommend you just kind of go ham and add extra threads wherever you desire. I placed 2 more towards the back of my base strings, and then wove another string sideways along the top of the hat. For this step, you can add as many strings as you want until you kind of refine that cobwebbing to the look that you desire. Once your strings are laid out where you desire, cut any excess threads, and then once again with your tacky glue, add another hat directly on top of the previous one and allow it to dry. And now we're moving on to the final steps of this process. First, let's go ahead and add some color to basically define our hat. I'm going to be using a violet purple pencil just to add some color to our witch's hat, as you can see here. Then I took a lighter gray and softened the edges of my purple just to kind of blend the two together. Now, if you make any mistakes or you maybe just don't really like where one of your colors ended up, you can always use a black pencil to correct. Finally, last time with your tacky glue, add this final hat directly on top of the previous one and allow it to dry. For the last step, let's add some bling to our hat. Using these multicolor micro gem strips that I got at Michael's, go ahead and cut off 3 gems that you would like to attach to your cobwebs. Then with your Cricut weeder tool, place the gems along the thicker string knots. That's basically why we added those little knots earlier, so that these little gems have something that they can stick to. Since the back of these gems are coated with a sticky residue, they should stick to those thicker portions of the strings with just a little bit of pressure. And that's it. You have finished your witch's hat. Next, simply attach it to your fox's head and line up the hole with your fox's ear. I recommend placing reusable glue dots on the back of your hat and adhering that glue in a place where it's only going to be touching the white of your paper rather than the painting itself. This is just an added precaution to basically prevent the glue from lifting any of your previously painted colors. Once the season's over, I'm simply going to remove this hat later. That's the reason why I want this glue to be removable, and add a new holiday themed item. So basically these paintings will just continually be switching out and changing as the year goes on. If you want to learn how to paint the fox that you saw in this painting, make sure to check out the tutorial for that. It is on my YouTube channel, but you can get all of the extra supplies basically and resources that I mentioned here inside of Watercolor Misfit Land. I'll make sure to provide links down below so that you can check that out. And as always, y'all, lots of love and happy painting.